Greetings from the Green Party of Canada. The theme today are oceans and what we can do to help protect them. Because we know that they're in an incredibly fragile state, and we know that we can do a part, that we can take action in order to repair some of the damage and to prevent more from happening. One of the things that is a direct threat to our oceans and to all that lives within them is the increasing acidification caused by our warming planet. So as we tackle the climate emergency and seek to reduce greenhouse gases, we should all know that it has an important impact on preventing further acidification and ensuring that all living things within the ocean have a habitable, sustainable environment. We also know that human beings are releasing a lot of plastic into our oceans. This plastic is a mortal danger, and there's no exaggeration in saying that, a mortal danger to life in the ocean, whether it is ocean birds or whether it is other forms of marine life. And so our ban on single-use plastics is a start, but it's certainly not enough, and those microplastics continue to grow and grow and grow. And so this is something, again, that we have within our hands that could make a tremendous difference to our oceans. Our oceans are life. Our oceans contain most life on this, most of the diverse life on this planet. It covers most of our planet. And so we have to be responsible stewards. We have to be responsible stewards to the orca who are counting on us to make sure that they have something to eat, to make sure that they have somewhere to live that is safe. This is something that's within our hands, and I hope that we think about that today, we think about that every day, and that we continue to support policies, we continue to support local initiatives that make sure that the oceans remain somewhere that we can enjoy, and also every living thing that lives within them can enjoy. So thank you so much for doing your part. Thank you so much for considering what you can do, and I have every confidence that we have all that it takes to do it together.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's nice to see you here today. My name is Yusuf Suraj with Islam Unravelled Anti-Racism Initiative. Today we're gathered on World Oceans Day to really highlight the important role that caring for and protecting our oceans plays in not only our world's health, but also our survival as a human species. I'd like to start today's event by acknowledging that I am calling in from the ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations people. Across Canada, our viewers and our speakers are also calling in from ancestral territories of First Nations tribes, communities, and bands. And we want to thank them for their stewardship and their thousands of years of history of protecting and taking care of our environment. This is part of our inherited tradition as Canadians who are newcomers to the country, and we thank and respect our First Nations allies for taking that role. Today, there's two things that I think we need to start our event by acknowledging. The first is the horrible tragedy that befell a Muslim family in London, Ontario. A family of 5 was out for a walk. They were minding their own business. The day ended in bloodshed and horror for them when a white supremacist drove them over with his truck. He killed a father, a mother, a grandmother, a daughter, and left a 9-year-old boy completely orphaned. This tragic event has not just only shocked Muslims, but families all across Canada. And we offer them our condolences, our prayers, and our support. And we thank our allies in other faith communities who stood with us. One of our speakers today, Rabbi Dan Muskowitz from Temple Shalom, he came out in person to a vigil being held at the West 8th Al Jamia Masjid, and he stood there with us in solidarity. Again, the Muslim community, the Christian community, Jewish community, Chinese community, Black community, all communities across Canada that have faced either racialized or religious hate or discrimination understand what it's like to be the victims of mindless hate attacks. And we call on the government to take steps, whether it's a commission similar to New Zealand's Royal Commission to address this problem, or online legislation to help counter the hate content and spewing of violent rhetoric that contributes to online hate becoming real world violence. And I think that one of the things we do as allies for one another is to acknowledge when other communities are feeling pain. Our First Nations community here in British Columbia has been devastated by the news that 215 of their children's bodies were found buried at a residential school in Kamloops. This history of residential schools and the trauma inflicted upon the First Nations people has really been something that we have not done a good job of understanding as new Canadians or as allies to the First Nations people. Again, what you'll see throughout a lot of the events that we're putting together with our allies and community is that we have to stand together to address these causes that are destroying our communities, whether it's racism, whether it's Islamophobia, bigotry, or the continuing systemic racism and trauma, generational trauma faced by indigenous peoples. It's only through working together that we're able to address these. And I'd like to offer my personal condolences to the families and communities of these children. There's no way that we can ever understand what it's like to have to go through such a system of grinding oppression. And we hope and pray and will work together with them to help overcome that. With that being said, again, there are challenges in this world at the local, provincial, national, and global level. One of the things that really, if we don't address together, it wouldn't matter anything else because there will be no world left for us to argue over, is the environment. On World Environment Day, we brought together experts in the Environmental Conservatory in work towards online, both education, real world engagement, education for Indigenous people, for Black people, for all racialized minorities, like for the Muslim community as well, how to learn more about the environment, what's going on, and how to deal with it. And today, we're honored to have experts and speakers from across the spectrum to highlight the role of the world oceans, as well as their own personal backgrounds and perspectives on addressing environmental issues. And this is part of our convening of communities to find solutions to these problems. So I'd like to start with our first speaker today, Ms. Allison Gu. And again, thank you so much for joining us. Allison is a top 25, under 25 environmentalist youth leader. She was born and raised in Coast Salish territory, so Vancouver and Vancouver area. And then she moved to Montreal, where she completed her Bachelor's of Science in Kinesiology at McGill University, which is very interesting. My father actually took his bachelor's degree in the 1950s in Egypt in kinesiology. So that's a very wonderful subject to learn and to grow with. She's worked as a sustainability commissioner for the Student Society of McGill and as a research advisor for them as well. And fascinating effort she's done to help build awareness is that she actually cycled from Ottawa to Vancouver in protest of the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline back in 2017, and helping to fundraise for Indigenous land and water defenders. So again, an amazing young woman with a lot of experience and a fantastic attitude towards solving these problems through allyship and with her own work and passion. So please, Allison, take it from here.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and being here today. Like Yusuf said, I am also zooming in from the unceded lands of the Hunkaminam and Squamish speaking peoples. Similarly, I want to address and acknowledge the heartbreak and grief that folks must be feeling today after a family was callously killed because of deep-seated hatred and Islamophobia. I want to say that I stand with you, that I will always fight for justice alongside you, and that my heart breaks for you and for your communities that had to deal with the violence of Islamophobia again and again and again. There are so many reasons why it's important for people who are not Muslim to be advocating alongside you on a level of basic humanity. It's the bare minimum. But I think it's also pertinent when we're talking about topics like climate and coming together for World Environment Day and World Oceans Day. because Islamophobia was systemically created, just like the other isms and the other phobias that we experience today. I once heard a climate justice activist say something along the lines of, I'm not a climate justice activist because I'm passionate about the trees. I'm a climate justice activist because the US bombed my country for oil. And the Syrian refugee crisis was in part driven by conflicts over an oil pipeline. The violence in the Middle East more broadly has largely been due to the desire for US control over oil and natural resources. And when we're talking about the global manifestations of Islamophobia, there are many parallels to the conversations that many people have been having and starting to have around residential schools that have come up in the last week because of the recent discovery of the 215 children at the former Kamloops residential school. Residential schools and the subjugation and dehumanization of Indigenous peoples was done so intentionally so that colonizers could extract resources from the land that is now known as Canada. This colonization continues today, and this resource extraction continues today in the form of pipelines and other extractive projects. And racism is integral to the success of this resource extraction because it allows for corporations, for governments to do so without consequence and to do so without accountability and to do so in a way that is politically acceptable. This is why it's so important to center the conversation of climate justice when we talk about environmentalism. At the very root of it, climate change is racist because our systems are racist, and the destruction of the planet is dependent upon racism. Today, runaway capitalism and immense corporate profits are dependent upon cheap labor, which requires racism for people in wealthier countries to be able to defend or ignore. The extraction for the raw products requires destroying the lands where people live, and to do so, again, without any accountability, requires the dehumanization of those who live there. A project that is ongoing and currently being built is the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline Project. Like Yusuf said, I cycled from Ottawa to Burnaby against the project while fundraising for Indigenous land and water defenders who were fighting the project in court. And this project is significant not only because of how the emissions from the project will render our climate targets virtually impossible, but also because of its impacts on the ocean. The expansion project will triple the capacity of the pipeline to 890,000 barrels of oil per day. This is bad enough on land, but on water, it's expected to increase tanker traffic 7-fold. And a recent SFU study estimated that the probability of a tanker spill over a 50-year operating period is between 43 and 75%. And a spill could cost as much as $2.6 billion. For a pipeline that is already costing us $12.6 billion, it's beginning to add up, and it's making even less and less sense every single day, economically, environmentally, on a justice level. And so if there's a spill, this impacts everything from salmon to potentially fragile habitats. And even just on the ocean's perspective, this is, again, a climate justice issue because of the ways that many First Nations communities have deep relationships with the lands and waters and depend more on the health of ecosystems and marine life. Even in the extremely unlikely scenario that there is no spill ever, the 7-fold increase in tanker traffic will have devastating impacts on marine life. especially on larger marine life like the southern resident killer whale, which is endangered, and the humpback whale. There are rippling effects of climate destroying impacts that many racialized and indigenous communities have been leading the fight on. And our survival depends on listening, uplifting, and amplifying those voices in our fight for a world that is not only livable, but just. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. And I think the importance of tying in climate justice with climate change is something that a lot of folks are starting to realize as being of the utmost importance in addressing this. The intersectionality of the challenges facing our diverse communities can never be understated. And I do agree that a lot of it has to do with historical injustices. And those historical injustices are really perpetrating and perpetuating a lot of the personal and environmental crimes that are going on. One of the most horrific things that we came across in our research for today's event was the prevalence of slavery in fishing fleets in Southeast Asia, where people are literally just kept on these boats against their will for decades at a time and used to fish, and that fishing industry is perpetrated by in essence a slave system. The injustices going around across Africa and developing countries, where fishing fleets from some Asian countries, some European countries, wantonly go in and just take all of the resources available. I believe there was a statistics that $2.5 trillion of the world's economy is directly related to the oceans and the food stocks and the resources available there. You know, more than 70% of the earth is covered by ocean. And yet everyday activities are being conducted by human beings, are continuing to put the oceans at risk. So thank you again, Allison, for highlighting these important issues. I know you have another appointment after this, and I wish you very good luck with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Allison.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about the importance of preserving and protecting this wonderful planet that we all live on and enjoy. The Quran tells us about each generation having temporary custody of the earth. And what that means is when a generation is living on the planet, then they will take certain decisions and carry out certain activities, and that is going to affect what happens to the next generation and what they're left with. So succeeding generations, هو الذي جعلكم خلائف الأرض. Each generation is given temporary custody of this planet, and it is a part of the test from God that how will they deal with what God has given them, what God has placed in their trust. لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِيمَا آتَاكُمْ. In this short talk, I would like to share a few points from the Islamic tradition that relate to our dealings with the planet, and most specifically, the great resource of water. In over 60 places, the Quran talks about the importance of water, the significance of water as a bounty, as a resource, as something crucial. And it also gives us subtle warnings that this bounty doesn't have to remain forever. Because in one place, it says that we have sent down this water in a measured proportion, and we have made arrangements for it to stay on this earth. We're talking about fresh water. So how does it stay on this earth? فَسَلَكَهُ يَنَابِيعَ, in one place, that it is diverted into various channels, streams, lakes, rivers, ponds, and so on and so forth. And in this way, it is made accessible to human beings and to other creatures. But the Quran also says, وَإِنَّا عَلَى ذَهَابٍ بِهِ لَقَادِرُونَ, that God does have the ability to take this water away. Now, why would he take that water away? Well, one of the rules or guidelines that are given in many religious traditions is the more we look after a blessing, then the longer that blessing remains. And when we are ungrateful for a blessing or we misuse it, then it is taken away from us. In one place, the Quran says that, have you thought about this water, this fresh water that you consume? And it also says that if we wanted, we could make it all salty, turn it all into salt water. And then what would you do? An interesting point related to this is that the majority of the fresh water reserves on the planet are in Antarctica in the form of the glaciers. And when the Earth is negatively impacted by our activities, then the effects of global warming start taking place. Glaciers begin to melt. And where will all those glaciers melt into? Of course, it will melt into the ocean in the case of Antarctica, and it will be a part of salt water. In any case, we have been urged in the Islamic tradition to respect water and to look at it with the eye of gratitude. In fact, one of the prophetic statements is that one of the first things a person will be asked about on the Day of Judgment is the health of their bodies and fresh water that they had to drink. And in another place, it's mentioned that water is a collective and common right of all people. So all human beings have an equal right to water. And anyone who impedes that, either by taking it away from people or making it difficult for people to access water, or soils it and pollutes it in such a way that it becomes unusable for people, is guilty of a major breach in the religion. One of the things that cannot be withheld from people, as the prophetic teaching says, is water. And one of the people who will be taken to very harsh account on the Day of Judgment is the one who withheld water from people. Now, one is to withhold water because somebody is asking for it and the person who has it is not willing to share it. This is one form of withholding water. Another form of withholding water is by monopolizing it. And another form of withholding water from others is by rendering it unusable, by polluting it. One of the things in Islamic tradition, one of the things that result in being cursed. Now, this curse could be from God or from all people and even from animals, is a person who pollutes water that people and animals go to drink from. So, putting all of this together, we find that it is our duty to look at water as a crucial resource and as a common resource for all of mankind, in fact, for all life on this earth. The second thing is to make sure we don't do anything to the water resources that would make them unusable or compromise the quality of water, because a compromise in the quality of water directly results in a compromise in the quality of life for human beings and for animals. And being educated and well aware of the circumstances around the world, we don't need to go into too much detail. There is a great deal of scientific observation and research into what we're talking about here. The other thing is to use water wisely and carefully. An example of that is that Muslims have to perform an ablution before they pray, which is it is a ritual of washing. We wash our hands and our forearms, we wash our faces, we wash our feet. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, demonstrated the correct usage of water by becoming a role model for us, an example for us in this. He would never use more than a liter of water for his ablution. In fact, the vessel that he used could only hold somewhere between 600 to 700 milliliters of water. That was the water he used for ablution. And in fact, if he saw someone using too much water, he would admonish them. He saw a person performing ablution and was using more water than they needed to. And he said, "What is all this wastage?" And he said, "How can it be wastage if I'm using this to purify myself and cleanse myself?" So the Prophet, peace be upon him, told him that, no, it's wastage, even if you're doing it at the bank of a free-flowing stream or river. That even there, where the water is flowing and plentiful, even there you need to be very careful about how much you use. The Quran says that eat and drink, but do not be wasteful. And this theme is repeated in the Quran. Taking a bath, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, would take a bath, he had a vessel for that. And according to modern measures, that vessel was holding only about 3 liters of water. That was the total amount of water that he used for bathing. All of this is teaching us about conservation and preservation of this vital resource. It is a common right. It is a crucial resource. And what happens to our water directly impacts life on this earth, whether it is the fresh water that we are drinking, or it's the water in the oceans, in which so much marine life is thriving, and that also has a direct impact on the rest of this planet. It's time that we took careful measures and quick steps to making sure that the resource of water is preserved and conserved, it is looked after, and it is kept clean and pure so that life on this planet can continue to thrive. These were some thoughts from the Islamic tradition, and hopefully this will give us some insight as to the religious duty of human beings towards water from the Islamic perspective. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that we can take some serious measures to make sure that A, we stop the harmful activity, the activities that are harming our planet, and B, we come up with sustainable programs to educate our communities about this and to educate mankind at large, and at least from the perspective of spirituality and religion, take this very, very seriously. Thank you very much.
Next speaker today is Rabbi Dan Muskowitz from Temple Shalom in Vancouver, Canada. He's the senior rabbi at Temple Shalom. Rabbi Dan is an active leader in the community's response to many crises, including the Syrian refugee crisis, climate change, mental health, social isolation, and addressing racism and discrimination against communities, as well as anti-Semitism. Rabbi Dan is also the chair of the Reform Rabbis of Canada and on the steering committee for the Canadian Reform Judaism. And on a personal note, I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks and appreciation for coming out to support the Muslim community yesterday, Rabbi. It was wonderful to see you at Westgate Al Jamia Masjid. And I know you've always stood with our community in these challenging times, whether it was at this one or in Christchurch, or in any of the other horrible events that happens. And this is what I think many people should be aware of, is the allyship and the brotherhood that exists between many communities here in Canada, and the interfaith alliances that we're trying to build together in order to address whether it's racial discrimination, whether it's mental health addiction, or whether it's environmental issues. And I thank you for your leading role in that, sir. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yusuf, and thank you all for joining us. And I will reiterate again what I said last night. I stand by your side in what has become a far too necessary fight against hatred in our communities of so many peoples. And as I said last night, your pain is unique to you, but we understand it in the Jewish community of having felt it in our own ways. That should not be what brings us together, though it often does. And I am so glad that we can be brought together for this purpose this evening as well. So thank you for having me. A few years ago, a lifetime ago before COVID, Simon Fraser University here in Vancouver put on a seminar about faith and the environment. And I was in a room at that time with about 75 other faith leaders, back when we can be in a room with 75 people and not on Zoom. It was, I think, almost literally preaching to the choir. And I am so tired of words. As beautiful as words can be, as powerful as words are, as moving as words are. I've written so many sermons this past year and articles and eulogies. We spoke words last night, as beautiful and as powerful and as moving as they are. Jews are called the people of the book. We do words really well. But I have to be honest with you. Words are not going to save our planet. And I am well aware of the hypocrisy of using words to even make that point. It's going to take action, of course. It's going to take actual effort. It's going to take heroic effort. So at that seminar a number of years ago, they put up a slide on the screen. And I took a photo of it with my phone because it crystallized, I thought, the challenge in front of all of us as faith leaders and as people of faith. The quote was attributed to somebody I had not heard of before, but have now learned a lot about, Gus Speth, the American environmental lawyer and advocate who, among many other things and important roles, was the dean of the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies a while ago. And he was quoted as saying, "We scientists don't know how to do that." That was the title of the slide. And then he went on, the quote did, "I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. And I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are, in fact, selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists," Gus added in conclusion, "don't know how to do that." When I think about that threefold challenge of selfishness, apathy, and greed, I think in spiritual terms. Science may not know how to solve those problems, but religion does. That's in our wheelhouse. We live in a world of deconstructing selfishness, apathy, and greed, of breaking each of them down to their distinct parts and then guiding our co-religionists to a life where they are not ruled by those natural impulses, and constructing a society built on values where those same three impulses and human desires are relegated, not celebrated. You know what gave me hope that we could confront selfishness, apathy, and greed? COVID. COVID gave me hope. And I know that sounds odd, and I am certainly not trying to traffic in the real pain and devastation that the pandemic has wrought on society. Yet, we are trained as people of faith to find the blessings in the midst of the curses. And the blessings of this pandemic was more than a few examples of society actually pulling together for the benefit of all, even the benefit of those who were unknown to us all. This was more than banging pots and pans, and this was people staying home to protect themselves and others. This was governments opening up the public purse to pay for the essentials. This was science collaborating across oceans and borders and differences to arrive at therapies and vaccines in lightning speed. We've not beat COVID yet, but we have shown that we can, that we could. That the only thing stopping us is maybe those self-same human failings of selfishness, apathy, and greed. In Jewish tradition and folktales, there's a story about a king and a beautiful bird, the most beautiful bird in all the forest. The king was walking in his garden one day and he saw this bird, and this king was known for having always wanted the most beautiful thing. And so he said to his attendants, I have to have that bird. It's the most beautiful thing in the forest. It's got to be mine. And so they went to try to get the bird, but the bird flew up on a higher branch. And so they went and they climbed and they got a ladder and they tried to get the bird, and the bird flew up higher. And they got a taller ladder and they got a rope and they got a net. And every time they tried and tried and tried, the bird flew higher and higher. Until finally they stood on top of each other's heads and shoulders until they made this giant tower of people swaying against the tree that the bird was against or on. And they reached for the bird at the very, very top of the tree. And just as they were about to grab it, the bird flew away. And the people came tumbling down. And the king said to all around him, stop. I don't want the bird anymore. The bird's not the most beautiful thing in the forest. The most beautiful thing in the forest was all of you working together. That's what I want to have. As I said, I'm tired of words and sermons and speeches, and I give many of them, way too many of them. There are their own form of pollution, I think. They are not the solution in and of themselves, and clergy of all people are the ones that too often forget that. It's like thinking that by posting about racial justice on Facebook, we are somehow social justice warriors. But actions speak louder than words. We've known that for a long time. In the Jewish tradition, the purpose of prayer is to move us to action. In fact, at the end of the service, at the end of the Jewish service, we have a concluding prayer called Aleinu, and in Hebrew, Aleinu means upon us. It's on us to do something. In essence, the prayer says that all that we have spoken and all that we have said and all that we have chanted and all that we have sung is wasted if it only stays in that room, in this sanctuary. That God doesn't need our words. God doesn't need our praises. In fact, the point of prayer in Judaism is actually not to praise God, but rather through our prayers, though our prayers are filled with the language of praise, the point of prayer in Judaism is to find ourselves worthy of God's gift of life and creation. The point of prayer is to speak through God to ourselves, to move us to be extensions of God in the world. And in that very prayer in Aleinu is the line that has been so much at the core of my own faith and that of Reformed Judaism. L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to repair the world in the vision that God created it. And that's the purpose of our being created in the image of God, to be extensions of God in the world, extensions of holiness, extensions of godliness. But you cannot be an extension of God if you are sitting on your bum in the pews. God doesn't sit down. God gets up and acts and works and does. And so to be an extension of God, we have to move from prayer to action. That's the purpose of prayer. When the late, great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma for racial justice, he was asked by members of his congregation, Rabbi Heschel, why are you marching in the streets? You're a rabbi. Shouldn't you be on your pulpit? Shouldn't you have been in your synagogue? Shouldn't you have been teaching Torah, praying the Sabbath prayers, teaching a bar mitzvah student? Heschel's famous reply: when I was marching in Selma for racial justice, I was praying with my feet. What role does religion play in saving our planet? It plays the role of motivator. It needs to motivate the people in our churches, in our synagogues, in our mosques, in our temples to reject selfishness, to reject apathy, to reject greed, and to get out of our sanctuaries, to get off of our bums and start praying with our feet and our hands and our actions. And again, I'll say it, just as we have done in our responses to COVID, just as we have responded to a 100-year pandemic with 18 months of science and innovation and compassion and empathy and wisdom, not always perfect, not always equitable, not always complete, but we have shown that we can solve problems. We can solve huge, global, worldwide problems. And we can do the same to save the earth. In fact, we're the only ones that can. Thank you for inviting me this evening.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Dan. Again, you know, what you're saying, it really touches my heart, because the action is what is needed now. I think we more or less know enough about what to do. We have built alliances. We are aware we are continually connecting new groups together, new communities with one another to move in the direction of active change. And what we're seeing around the world is this groundspring of people saying that enough is enough. We have to protect our world. We have to protect our oceans, our forests. And it is not a sectarian issue. It's not a political party issue. It's not a religious sect issue. It's a human issue, because this is our home. This is our planet. And if we're unable to resolve these challenges within our lifetimes, it's going to be very difficult for our children and their children. And who knows how long it can keep going like this. There's a lot of studies out there saying quite bluntly that it can't go on like this. So, you know, as people who are aware, as people who are caring, it's grateful to us to see that there are leaders such as yourself taking a role in educating your community about the importance of this, as well as building alliances with other communities. So Toda, Rabbi Dan, thank you very much again. And, you know, just to touch on one topic, you know, the oceans, what are they to us? I think it's important for people to sometimes stop and think. In essence, they're a major source of food and medicine. They play a crucial part in the biosphere of the world. And in essence, they're really the lungs of the planet. Many people think of rainforests or they think of forests. However, it's really the oceans that are really convening and bringing forth oxygen, taking in carbon. They play such a huge role in this. And the aim of World Ocean Day actually is to emphasize the key role that our oceans play in our everyday lives. In addition to inspiring action, as we were also saying, to protect the oceans and sustainable use of marine resources, because they are resources, people do live with them, people do need them, and we acknowledge that and we support that. But it is really true sustainability that needs to be worked on, to be thought about. And one of the things that I think many of our viewers might not be aware is some of the incredible challenges actually going on. Microplastics, for instance, are a bane on sea life. It's reported that microplastic pollution in the marine environment, so in oceans, is more than double previous estimates. It's been found in not only human bodies, but in developing humans within their mother's womb. And this is all a result of the plastics being broken down, being expunged into the oceans and not being recycled properly. It's killing fish, it's destroying their ability to genetically reproduce. And it is one of the challenges that we are facing. I would say that when we think about pollution in the ocean, many people are unaware, but over 50% is actually just discarded fishing materials. And when we think of straws, when we think of, kind of can holders and all the things that we see on TV or in social media about what's causing harm to aquatic life, it's important to recognize that the majority of it comes from human industry, not human consumption. And to bring awareness to those, to help to really highlight the importance of having a balanced economic and environmental situation, we have an expert tonight with us who will go in detail about all of these things. And we're very grateful to have you here with us, Dr. Rashid. So Dr. Rashid Somalia, he is a University of British Columbia professor from the Department of Oceans and Fisheries. He is the Canadian Research Chair in Interdisciplinary Ocean and Fisheries Economics at the Institute for the Oceans of Fisheries at UBC. Dr. Somalia's research focuses on bioeconomics, marine ecosystems valuation, which is the analysis of global issues such as fishery subsidies, marine protected areas, illegal fishing, climate change, plastic pollution, and oil spills. So the broad, vast knowledge and touching on some of the little items that I mentioned. So he has a presentation to share with us today. And please, Dr. Somalia, please go ahead. You have the ability to share now, and we look forward to hearing your prepresentation. Sorry, Doctor, you're on mute. There you go.
I always forget to unmute, Thank you very much. And I'll share the screen. Hopefully I get the right one, and then we can get going. I think we are almost there. Yeah, so do you see the slides?
Yes, they're coming through.
Oh, very good. So yeah, first of all, I'm calling from UBC campus. So on the unceded territory of the Musqueam people, and always grateful to First Nations indigenous people for allowing us essentially to enjoy this part of the world, beautiful part. So thank you so much. And all the previous speakers have touched on issues that we'll hear from my talk, but I'll mainly be providing information from research on oceans. Mainly there's economics in there, but I call myself an interdisciplinary oceans and fisheries economist, because I'm not one of the economists who say all we should care about is to maximize profit. There's a lot more to our oceans than just making money out of it. And so that is my point of departure, so. All right, so you can see from the title of my talk, I'm saying that the ocean is our life. And Yusuf, you touch on that in your comments, and I'll be itemizing some of the things the ocean does for us, and it will by no means be the whole list. It's just part of the many things that we humans rely on the ocean for, sometimes without even knowing that the ocean does all these things for us. So a basic outline, I'll say, why do we want to sustain the ocean? Why do we want to? Still, you have to try to convince people. This is not a given. And economics of sustainable ocean management. How can economics, and again, this is my take on economics, is how can economics integrated with other disciplines, with other perspective, with religious leaders thinking, indigenous people thinking, ecological knowledge, local knowledge. How can you bring all those together in an integrated fashion in order to help us sustain our oceans, not only for us, but also for future generations? So then I end up with a bit on financing the sustainable ocean economy. And I'm doing this actually just to show you that no matter how good your ideas is, and this actually connects to what the rabbi is saying, that talk is not enough. And to get action, you need some way to support and fund and provide the resources for people to be able to do this. So just today we published a paper in Nature Communications, and that was the subject of the paper. So I'll just tell you a few things about that. Now, this is, I like to start here because really there are many of us who don't realize how huge the ocean is. It's 70% of Earth's surface. So some of us even say, why do we call it we should call it planet ocean, right? The Earth is only 30% of it. And so to me, there are about 3 points you can make out of this. In the first place, it's just too large to ignore or to mess up. We cannot afford to mess up our ocean. It's simply too large for that. Why do I say that? I tell my students this: if you keep scoring 30% in your exams, you will never be in this class to start with, right? So you cannot mess up 70% of something that is important to you and think that you will be okay. So that's one big point. The second point is that because it is so large, it doesn't mean that we cannot destroy it, we cannot abuse it. And we have the technology to actually abuse the huge ocean. There's all these big boats that fish have no chance. There's no how the fish can hide away from our big brains and technology and all those things. So it's big, but we can actually, in this evidence, as I'll show you, that we are actually pushing the ocean to its limit in many respects. Now, the third one, which is hopeful point, is that because it's so large, it doesn't mean that we cannot sustain it, we cannot protect it, we cannot keep it going into the future for all generations, right? So, and that is a hopeful message. And sometimes I give a talk in Africa, in Asia, Latin America, I say, come on, Rashid, we are so small, what can we do? Whatever we do, the big nations will just run over us. There is some truth to that, but at the same time, we all know that little drops of water made the mighty ocean in itself. So every little drop, every little effort, and this again is about action, right? Don't say that I'm too small to do anything. I mean, most of the good things and some of the bad things that have happened in this world actually started by one person. So let's focus on the good things here because we want to sustain our ocean. All right. Too large to mess up, not too large not to mess up. And too large doesn't mean that it's not too large for us to keep it going. Now, here are some numbers for you. 60% of the world's population lives within 60 kilometers of the coast. When this was published, it was years ago. I'm sure it's even more than that because we people are attracted to the coast, and people in Vancouver will tell you this. And there are many reasons why we do this. It's just a good part of the space on Earth to be at the coast. And it generates about 50% of the oxygen on Earth. And this is where the title of my talk comes from. So the ocean is our life, because without the ocean, essentially, it means that 50% of the oxygen on Earth will not be there. And so that's half of a life. What is half of a life? Half of a life is no life, right? So the ocean is our life. And the ocean regulates the Earth's climate. And people in Vancouver, we know this like crazy, because in winter, even in summer, you rather be in Vancouver than in Winnipeg, right? Which is in the interior, right? The ocean does that. How much are you willing to pay for the moderate weather we enjoy, both in winter and in summer? I talked with my friend in Lethbridge, and he says it was 35 degrees sometime last week, right? Just like that. And they get minus 35 degrees in winter. The ocean is part of the reason we have this nice weather here. It is crucial, therefore, for the Earth's environmental balance and survival. Absorbs the heat, and I could go on and on and on. This is too important to ignore. Then cultural and spiritual values. I had a student who actually did research on the spiritual values of the coast here in BC. Amazing, right? You go out to the coast, you have to go this weather, just go out there without COVID. The kind of people you will see, families having fun, enjoy. You just walk on the sand or a little bit in the water, and you just feel some spiritual benefits and so on. So transportation, shipping, think of that. Without it, many things will not move around the world. It's a playing ground for many of us, recreational tourism, ecotourism, and it is jobs, support jobs, livelihoods, incomes, especially in places where alternatives for these jobs are actually minimal, so it's almost a life-saving source of livelihood for people. And how about the protein we get from the ocean, the fish? And it's not just protein, it's also macronutrients. It is good animal protein compared to beef, for example. That's what the scientists and the medical people are telling us. So if you look at the fish stock in our ocean, and this applies also to the freshwater systems, there is so many activities that take place around this fish. So we are hanging on the fish in so many ways. I mean, what are the fish you catch and eat, the jobs and the marine research? I would have to look for another job if not for the fish in the ocean, right? Which may be hard or simple, but I would have to find something else to do. All the things that surround aquaculture. Many of us think aquaculture will save us, but actually, if you're farming salmon, that means you are crushing more of other species like Peruvian anchovita and sardines and so on, in order to create the fish meal and oil that salmon wants to eat. Otherwise, you have tofu, you don't have salmon, you don't have fish, right? And this connects to what Allison was saying. A lot of these small fish come from developing countries where there is malnutrition, there is need for food security. So you have all those global dynamics playing around here. So this is central to so many things we do. Now, again, just to give you some numbers, every year, on average, we take about 100 million tons of fish out of the ocean. Now, just think about that. This is massive. I mean, 100 million tons of fish. To help people to really crystallize what this means, what I do is to convert this to the number of mature cows. And if you assume a ton is the weight of an average mature cow, that means we're pulling out of the ocean 100 million mature cows year in, year out to feed people. So for the food side, that's fine. But think of the natural system. Think of the marine ecosystem, the ocean. What system, even as large as the ocean, can sustain this massive pool of biomass out of it? So we have to think about the sustainability aspect of this seriously. Fish is good protein, and like I said, macronutrients. And I say fish is food that is important to the rich and the poor alike. I mean, if you're in Vancouver, you have a good day, normal times, not COVID times. You want to go celebrate, you go to a restaurant. One of the things you will order, most people, or many people, is fish, right? Now, if you are from Southeast Asia or parts of West Africa or parts of Latin America, the Caribbean, fish may be the only animal protein you can afford to have in your meals. So this is really, really important in that respect. Jobs, I mentioned jobs. 260 million people around the world, according to our estimates, draw some income from the ocean, the marine fisheries sector, if you think about the whole value chain of the fish. 260 million. And what really blew my mind is when we put this data and to determine where these jobs are, you look here, they are all large, basically, apart from Myanmar, large developing countries. And to me, this was a big message. So fish is also a national and global security resource. Can you imagine all the young people that are getting their income from fish in Nigeria or in the Philippines or even in parts of China? Without that, they will have nothing to do. Can you imagine the social and economic problems? And these things will not stay in these countries. We're a global community, right? Some of us want to build walls, but you just have to forget walls. They are not going to work. We have to let the whole world work if we want to have a sustainable, equitable world, right? So I gave this talk I showed this figure when I gave a talk at the State Department. Fortunately, Obama was the headliner for that day, and this was in 2016, and I said, you all remember how quickly Obama became gray when he became president. I said, if not for fish, he would have been grayer, because all these big nations, problems they start there. Think of Somalia, for example. You all heard about the piracy, right? Some of the reasons for that, according to readings and researchers, because there was no government to protect the ocean, there was a lot of dumping and stealing of the fish, illegal fish. So local vigilantes grew up to protect their fish, and that grew into the piracy, right? So this is a crucial security resource for the world. Now, I'm now going to share with you my favorite model of our relationship with the ocean, but even the larger environment, because that's what the ocean is. If you take it down to the basics, what do people do to and with our environment? It's just those two arrows, I think, boil everything down. We go to the ocean and we take all the good stuff, the things we want, the things we need, the things we desire from the ocean into our economy, and we do all our cultural, social, and all those things. And at the end of the day, what do we produce? We produce waste, the plastic, the CO2, the carbon. We pump them back into the ocean. And really, if we don't do the taking wisely and we don't do the pumping out wisely, we're going to kill the system that supports us so much. So for me, this captures all the issues we think about in terms of how best to sustain our ocean into the future. You have to do the taking well and the pumping out well. Otherwise, we are going to hit the rocks, as we seem to be doing. So how are we doing? Clearly, our oceans are under threat. Our fish stocks are in threat. So here, the top figure here is what has been made famous by one of our professors here at UBC, Daniel Pauly, in a paper in 1998, described what is happening to our oceans as a phenomenon which he described as fishing down the marine food web. And this has three components to it. First of all, when we start fishing in any water body, the first things we do, we take the big valuable fish first. Take them out, then we go to the next big valuable. And then the next, that's the fishing down marine food. So we are taking too much, but not only that, we are truncating the natural network, the natural ecosystem that nature provides us. We are taking that down, we're taking too much. And the third thing we do, if you look here, you look at the bottom, in the beginning, the habitat is richer. So we plow the bottom of the ocean with all our big trawlers, destroy the habitat, and so this is what is known as fishing down the marine food. And we see this happening around the world and has consequences, as I will show. How about climate? Climate, sea surface temperature rising, that's what you're seeing. If it is yellowish or reddish, that means the current temperature of the surface of the ocean is higher than the long-term average. So the more reddish it is, and this is what we're seeing. And then you have ocean acidification, you have deoxygenation, and all the processes that the biophysics of the ocean is changing. Then you have the plastic and the debris in the oil spills, my God. So there's a lot of pressure on the ocean. We've got to do something, just like social justice, and they're interconnected, as some of my slides will show you. So this slide is simply to say, when you hear me or many of us talking about marine biodiversity, we do care about marine biodiversity because this is part of our system, which is bequeathed to us by nature or by God. You can say it anyhow, but the bottom line is part of the natural system. And what we see, these are diagrams to summarize the amount of fish we take from the ocean and how much of that comes from healthy fish stocks and how many of them are unhealthy. And what you see from 1950, we take a lot of our fish from healthy stocks. And as time goes on, more and more, we are taking the fish from depleted stocks and sometimes even crash. That is below 10% of the maximum we've taken. And these are figures from our group at UBC. This is from the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, and they show the same trend. Now, these changes in the ecosystem and the fish stock are not just for fun. This is real. They impact people. I mean, so this guy is saying, is that all the shrimp I get after all this work? You know, in West Africa, where I grew up, people, you will go for 6 hours and fill their boats when I was a kid. Now they go for a week and they can get a fraction of what they used to get in 6 hours, right? This has consequences on people, food security. The lady here, that is something we are seeing more and more, environmental refugees. So if you are in your coastal town or village, climate change is messing up, the fish is gone, people don't just sit down and die. This is what people have done throughout history. When things are too difficult in one place, you move. This has nothing to do with whether you are African or you are Asian or Latin American or European or indigenous. In general, people move when things are difficult, and wars cannot stop us, we the people, right? So let's just solve the problems rather than trying to create all sorts of boxes to put people in. It's not going to work. It doesn't work in the long run. So this is a summary figure that shows you, as we mess around with the ocean, with the physics and chemistry of the ocean, that has consequences on the animals in the ocean and therefore on people who depend on these animals. And this figure is from a paper we published in 2019. And this was really, it hit me very hard. What we said is, what will be the benefits of meeting the Paris Agreement as it relates to the health of the ocean and the benefits we get, for example, the fish we catch. And so this figure tells you that if the world were to push through the Paris Agreement, ensure that we don't go over 1.5 degree relative to the long-term average, then what you will see is that some countries, so here on the y-axis, you see the change in the maximum potential catch that countries or regions or people can take from the ocean if we implement the Paris Agreement. And here is the contribution per capita on the x-axis of how much people in this country or region contribute to climate change through pumping of carbon. And so, you know, if we deal with climate change, the countries, you see Guinea here, Sierra Leone, these countries pump very little per capita, but they get the brunt of climate change. And this connects to what Allison was saying earlier. So we do the pumping, they feel the pain. And how ethical, how moral is this? How economically just is this? And so for the sake of the world, because these people will not just sit down and perish because their fish are gone, they're going to also, we will hear from these consequences. And you see here, this is continental. Again, Africa does well if we did this, because the fish, what we see is as the ocean is warming, the fish are moving towards the pole. So Iceland will get more fish, and not the Philippines, not Senegal. And that has, even though Iceland per capita pumps out more CO2. So a lot of justice issues in here. This is a specific study we did for West Africa, and you can see, man, the kind of losses are just devastating. I mean, you look at a country like what? That's Ghana, and you look at Nigeria, you come up here, and you will see big projected losses due to climate change. And these are the places where people actually need more food, right? Relative to say in Canada or in the global north. Yeah, there's lots of things to think about here. So and another thing that is happening in our oceans is illegal fishing. There's a lot of it going on, whether it is boats from Europe or from the rich Asia, from China, from, you know, or even from North America, you know, going to the developing world waters, sometimes with the permit to do so, sometimes without. So in this paper, we actually calculated the consequences of it. And you can see Africa is losing huge, about $13 billion in economic impact being zapped away by illegal fishers to the richer parts of the world, which leads to losses in income for people so they can live their lives and their children to school and keep the family going. Taxes are lost by governments that need taxes more than anything to fix schools and infrastructure and hospitals. So huge consequences here in terms of the. Another thing I wanted to drop here, and I'm going to go fast here, it's good to have time to discuss. We need to see the ocean as a global system. We have one global ocean because they are all interconnected. You have interconnection at the level of nature. The fish move, currents move. You have plastic moving from one part of the world once it gets into the ocean to another part. All these things are interconnected, and we have to think more holistically, more comprehensively. You cannot just say, oh, I protect my waters and I'm fine. No, you are not. Things happen. You know, when the nuclear blowout happened in Japan, I used to get phone calls saying, how is our fish? The waste, is it going to affect? And there were some evidences of that. So what you do in one part of the ocean can really affect what happens in the other part. Now, many of our fish stocks are already overfished. In Canada, we did a study and published in 2019, 6 Canadian stocks that have already been so overfished, we are not getting nearly as much as we would. And thinking about Indigenous First Nations people, the sockeye salmon is going down, and all the other species, this has huge consequences. So the rare efforts some of us are pushing, we really have to do our best to bring this fish back as much as we can. And when you talk about this, the first thing, the politics of fishing effort, right? The politicians say, gosh, you want us to cut fishing effort, what will people do? And so on and so forth. And we and others have shown that actually if we have the political will and the guts to really pull back a bit, the fish will come back to a good extent, and we move away from the current misery, have more resources for people who really need them. So that's that. Now, some of the policy things, you know, we give a lot of subsidies, what we call harmful subsidies, where the government is actually giving subsidies to the large industrial fishing boats, mainly, so they can go and fish in indigenous waters and also in waters of developing countries. Europe is big on this with respect to West Africa. Don't use taxpayer money to aggravate inequality and degrade our ecosystem. Please don't do it. Don't do it. There are ways to use our tax resources to support the environment and support real people living in the coast who actually need some relief. Yeah, I'm dropping this here for you. We talked about I talked about illegal fishing already. This is just a picture of how much is going on around the world. And I mentioned the Horn of Africa, Somalia, you can see, and that led to piracy, which was very costly, not only to Somalians or Africans or East Africans, but to the world at large. So this has global consequences. And a lot of our fish are shared between countries. So we need cooperative management. You cannot do it alone. If you are dealing with Pacific halibut, you have to talk with the US. The US has to talk with us. Otherwise, we drive the whole stock to hell, and then we have the losses. So cooperative management at regional, bilateral, and at global level are important if we're going to solve the problem. We talk about buying insurance. We need to carve out part of the ocean and just leave it alone, what I call fish banks of the world. There are parts of the ocean we just stay away. Stay away. Give the fish peace. Give them a break so they can prosper, they grow, their eggs and larvae can come into country waters close to us, so we don't need to pump too much carbon to go catch the fish in the high seas, areas far away beyond national jurisdiction. So each of these points I'm making are full presentations or more. I'm just trying to drop ideas here so we can have a nice discussion. Now we talk about ocean finance. All of the things I said cannot happen without adequate and good quality financing. So this is a report we did for the so-called high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, which is made up of 14 sitting heads of state, including Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada, and they're from all over the world, from Asia, from Africa, Latin America, Europe, North America, who have come together and say, look, the world has to do something to protect and sustain our oceans. So a number of reports were done for them, and I will just quickly show you some of the things we found. The ocean economy is a cornerstone of the global economy, contributing trillions, as I told you. In fact, some estimates say we get about $1.5 trillion economic impact from ocean economic activity. So it's like, but when we look at it, despite this, the sector is drastically underfinanced and underinvested. Less than 1% of the economy is actually used to protect the ocean, which is crazy, right? For something that is so important to us, we should invest more to make sure it goes on. Then you have climate change aggravating the pollution, the plastic. So to do this effectively, that is to protect the ocean and achieve a sustainable ocean economy, significantly greater finance is needed. And I'm talking about good quality finance, not the finance that aggravates overfishing or aggravates inequality. And you can get more in the report and in the paper that appeared in Nature Communication today. These are some of the figures in the paper. I don't have time to really go through here. But essentially, we identified a number of barriers to why we are not having good quality finance to support the ocean. And then we propose solutions to them. And these are some of the things. This presentation will be made available to all of you if you want to go into the details. And so we itemize different kinds of finance and where they can be helpful and where they cannot be helpful. So we need to, not just any kind of money we want in there, we want money that works for nature and works for people, not just promotes the pockets of the 1%ers, for example. Another figure, that kind of category, we need an enabling environment. There is a lot of government money already going into the ocean to support fishing in a harmful way. Don't do that, move that away. About according to the IMF, about $4.7 trillion of subsidies goes to oil and gas. Can you imagine how crazy that is? I mean, this is pushing climate change and all the consequences. That's the last sector you want to give a penny of our tax money, but that's where it goes. So divert distance and make them work for people and nature rather than undermine them. And all our studies and others have shown that if we protect our ocean, sustain it, let it work properly for as many people as possible, the returns is actually 1:5. Even if you're talking about dollars, for every dollar we invest and put to protect the ocean, we get $5 back, which is a good investment in how you look at it. So to conclude, I think we should look at fish as an indicator of how our ocean is doing. And I use fish here in parentheses because when I mean fish, I mean life in the ocean. We don't want to have a dead ocean. We want to make sure that ocean is teeming with life. That means we don't overfish, we don't take down their habitat, we don't pollute, and we need to work hard, because actually if we don't take care, we can end up with a dead ocean. Then that will be really, really a sad state of affairs. Thank you all for your attention, and thanks to the Islam Unravelled Anti-Racism Initiative for making this event possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Somalia. Again, it's amazing to see such expertise and detailed breakdown of the situation. I think many of our viewers are unaware of what an important role the ocean plays in our survival as a species, our well-being as a species, our physical, psychological, spiritual, even. Most faith traditions have a huge symbolism attached to oceans and water. And to see that the state it's in, it's heartbreaking. It's genocide against trillions and trillions of life forms. And I think, your presentation, we will make sure that it gets heard by our community, by other communities, so that people can understand. If you have a few minutes, do you want to maybe share, what do you think the solution for government and for the average person is? What can people do to help change this?
Yeah, no, excellent question. Essentially, we all have to be involved at different levels, I think. Yeah. So as an individual, we are consumers. We can make choices, and more we are getting ways we can make environmentalist wise decisions, whether you go into the supermarket, what you eat, and so on and so forth. For example, I personally, more and more, I'm eating vegetarian food, and that is so good. I feel light and good. My brain works better than being loaded with beef, for example. So we can operate at our own level to improve this, so we don't go after all these millions and billions of life forms, like you said. The second thing is, as an individual, you really have to participate. Your group is an example of a civil society organization, environmental NGOs. We should try to support this, because these are the truth tellers in our society. They keep businesses and government, they keep them in check, put their feet to the fire. We need that. And as voters, and this is something I always say, please don't forget the environment when you go out to vote. I mean, because if you do that, you're forgetting our only home, right? So you can't tell me that you want a sustainable environment and you go and vote for people who want to wreck it, right? I mean, you just have to have that in mind. So there are different levels at that. At the company level, we do have companies. I did a paper for Van City, the local credit union. They called me and said, how can we get our customers to really know that this climate thing is a big issue that is important for them? So you know what we did? We calculated how much it will cost a typical BC household. How much more will it cost them to eat the same quantity and quality of fish and the different scenarios of climate change? And this was unbelievable, huge. We will have to spend much more. So this took the whole discussion about climate to people's pocket. And the day we published this, I was busy from 6 a.m. to about 9 p.m. on TV, on radio, interviews, because it talked to people. And that's one city. They say, look, this is important. So companies can do. And our governments, please don't use our tax money to aggravate social injustice and environmental injustice. We need to be, and this is where civil society and all of us come in, because governments are representations of us, at least in democracies, right? And so there are all sorts of levels we can all participate.
Awesome. You know, I think that touches on it, right? It has to be a holistic approach. It has to be whether it's education, whether it's engagement, whether it's change in how we live our lives. One of my brothers, Tariq, he prefers to only eat the food that he catches or the food that he grows in the backyard, right?
Yeah.
So to have that sustainability be part of our way of life, I think it is something that we need to relearn. I believe the term is rewilding of people to get out of the way that our civilization has infantiled us to only be able to eat what we can buy from across the world, right? And to help change that narrative, to help change that mindset, to reduce our fish intake. And some practical information for folks, 40% of fish is mislabeled. Like you don't know what you're eating, right? I would highly encourage people to watch a documentary. I'm not speaking as to all the facts in it, but the idea behind it, Seaspiracy.
The idea behind it. Okay, you have to.
The idea behind it, which is to inform yourself. It's to inform yourself, to start looking into what's going on in the world. And then from there, you know, that's maybe pop science, and then take that into more real science. And again, we had your presentation, that's part of it. But we need to understand what's going on. And I'm sure there's a lot of powerful, you know, kind of industries who don't want us to be looking in too much detail of the world's oceans and what's going on there. But as people who are concerned about our planet, our future, our children, we have to. So thank you so much, Dr. Rashid. I really appreciate your time today. It was very informative. And we really thank you for your allyship and for your years of research on this topic.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Yeah. So bye-bye to the audience too. Thank you for being here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, sir.
Sure. Take care.